There's nothing that shows off the motion of the Earth more beautifully than circular star trails, and in this video I'm going to show you how to go out at night and shoot them. There's nothing that shows the motion of the Earth more beautifully than a good star trail photo. With a series of long exposures we can capture the changing position of the stars as the Earth rotates on its axis. We'll begin by looking at how to shoot for this, and then later on in the video I'll explain how to piece the sequence together. You don't need a lot of kit to shoot star trails, just a tripod and a cable release will do. The idea is we take a continuous sequence of 30-second exposures. The longer the sequence, the more rotation you get. Set up on a tripod and then choose manual mode and set your shutter speed to 30 seconds. Then set aperture to f4 or something similarly wide. Stars are quite dim, so we need a high ISO, perhaps start with 800, and then take a test shot. Too dark and you can adjust the ISO to 1600, or too bright, then go down to 400 instead. ISO 800 was spot on for me here. Now go to your drive mode settings and choose continuous shooting mode. This means the camera will fire as long as the shutter is engaged, so once the 30 seconds are up, the next shot will fire, then the next. This is where the cable release comes in. We can lock the shutter button down so that the camera shoots continuously. Then all that's left to do is wait. Conditions play a big part with this type of shot. We need a clear night sky as clouds hide the stars and ruin the effect. After sitting in the dark for an hour or so with my book and flask of coffee, disaster struck. A small patch of clouds rolled over the sky. And look what happens if I include those frames in my blended image. The bright clouds overpower the stars. Of course, I could cut out the offending frames, but this leads to gaps in the star trails. So instead, I ended up just using half the frames. And notice how the trails form expanding circles. To get this, for those of us in the northern hemisphere at least, we need Polaris, the North Star, in the frame. You might have noticed at the end of the sequence that things start to get a bit blurry. And this is down to the lens misting up as the temperature dropped. Keep a lens cloth handy to dab it if this happens. Luckily, it only affected the last few frames here. As for location, ideally move away from built-up areas as this will dull the stars down. However, it's not essential. I did a test sequence in my garden, which is something I'd recommend if you haven't shot star trails before. It goes to show that even though all the advice you read about star trails is to get as far away from ambient light as possible, on a clear night you can still capture them even in the heart of a busy town. Another piece of advice on star trails you'll often hear is that you need to wait until a new moon so that the sky is at its darkest. While this might mean brighter stars, it's also by no means essential. After waiting through a prolonged damp spell, when I finally got a clear night, the moon was so bright I barely needed a torch. Yet even with a near full moon, the stars are still fairly clear. A bright moon also has the added bonus that it'll light up the landscape. But if you don't have moonlight, then before heading home, try painting the foreground with light from a torch or a flash. You could then blend your light painted frames in with the stars later. I tried a few frames at the end, but with the moon so bright, I really didn't need to use them. And one last thing to do before heading off is to shoot a dark frame. Put the lens cap on and shoot a 30-second frame, and we can then use this to help cancel out irregular image noise later on. Now let's take a look at how to blend the frames together. So here's my set of images that I shot on the night open in Adobe Bridge here, and I can just scroll through and you can see I started off by playing with a few different compositions, and around about here I settled on it and started my sequence. And now if I scroll through these very quickly, you can see to begin with we had a few clouds and then a nice clear patch and then a few more clouds, and then towards the end there's a little mistake here where I flashed a light into the lens accidentally, so we'll have to fix that. And what I've done is star the images that I want to use. I've chosen a chunk of my sequence here because obviously I don't want to use those frames with the clouds because they'll ruin my effect. So I've just starred the ones I want to use with 2 stars, and then I can go to the little filter icon here and show 2 stars or more. If you want to star images in Bridge, you just hit Command or Control and then a number between 1 and 5 to give them that number of stars. So I've got my 2-star images. I can filter by 2 stars, and then I can hit Command or Control and A. That's Command A on a Mac, Control A on a PC to select all of them, and then I can right click and choose Open in Camera Raw. And this will open that entire sequence in Camera Raw, and you can see I've got all the files on the left of the screen here. So I'm just going to hit Command or Control and A to select all of the images in the film strip here, and now any changes I make to the settings are going to be applied to the whole set at once. So we could, for example, perhaps up saturation slightly, we could change the color temperature, perhaps up the exposure a tiny amount, perhaps up the clarity to see if we can crisp up the details in the sky a little bit, and then just play with these settings until we're happy. And then once that's done, I can go to Save Images down here, and I can use the settings here to save my images. So I'll choose to save them as JPEGs at the highest quality, and I'll select a folder, and I can just make a new folder here. We'll call this Tree Test Video, and hit Save. And you can see down here my images are saving. It might take a couple of minutes for them all to save into that new folder. And here's that batch of JPEGs ready to be blended together. Now, as I said, there was a point here where I flashed a torch into the lens. So before I blend the frames, I just need to open that image there. And then I'm just going to grab the brush tool, set my foreground color to black. And all I'm going to do is paint over that offending area there and then save the image. And now I'm ready to blend the sequence. So let's just go back into Bridge here. Now there are a few ways we can blend the images together. The most basic way would be to open up the images and then use the light and blend mode. So we could open them all by hitting Command or Control and A, and then go to Tools, Photoshop, Load Files into Photoshop Layers. Now this is going to take a while, but once it's done, we could then go into the Layers panel and change the blend mode of all of the layers from normal to lighten, and that will work, but it's going to take a long time to load up all of these images into separate layers. If I just escape, I'll show you a quicker way using an action that I've written for you. So let's have a look at the action. I'll show you first of all how to load it. If we just go to the Finder here, you can see here's the action, Star Trails action, and all we need to do is drag that into the Photoshop workspace, and then if we go to File, Actions, notice you'll see a new action set called Star Trails Action here, and the one we want to use is called Star Trails Blend. So we'll highlight that, and then we simply hit play, and then we'll get a series of instructions. First of all, we need to click continue and then open the first image in your sequence. So let's hit continue, and then we need to go to that newly created folder there and just open the first image. It can be any image, but we'll just open the first image. And then next we get another message telling us that we need to choose Set, Star Trails Action, Action, Copy and Close, Destination None, and then click Choose and find your folder. So let's hit continue. So we need to go in here and choose the Star Trails Action, and we need to set the action to Copy and Close. We need to set the destination up here to None, and we need to choose a source folder, and this of course is our folder of images here. And with that done, we can hit OK, and then all we need to do is sit back while the action runs. And then once it's complete, we get our star trail effect. Now the last thing we want to do here is blend in our dark frame that we shot with the lens cap on, and this will help to get rid of image noise. So let's go back into Bridge here, and we'll go back to my original folder here. We'll open up my dark frame down here. And then all we need to do is go to the Layers panel. So let's go to Window Layers. We can right click that layer, duplicate layer, and then select the other image in the destination document settings, hit OK. And then if we go back to the other layer, you can see now our dark frame sits above the image, and all we need to do here is change the blend mode from normal to subtract, and that would just help to cancel out any irregular noise. We can always hit Command or Control and E now to merge those two layers down, and then finally of course we can go on to improve the tones and adjust and enhance the image. And I like to do this using Camera Raw, so I'm just going to right click the layer first and convert it to a smart object to keep it non-destructive, and then I'll go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter. Of course, this is only available if you're using Photoshop CC. If you're using an older version, you could always just save out as a JPEG and then reopen that in Camera Raw if you like to use Camera Raw to make your tonal adjustments like this. So then let's perhaps just up the clarity, let's up the contrast as well. We could perhaps just up the exposure slightly. Let's adjust the temperature to cool it down a touch. Let's perhaps up the vibrance, lower the saturation a touch, and just play with these settings until we're happy. And of course we could go on to apply noise reduction if we like, and a touch of sharpening, and then hit OK. And that's my finished Star Trails image. So there we go. That's how to blend your sequence of Star Trail images together to create this wonderful effect.